Welcome to Inventing Our Future on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Brittany Zimmerman. Joining us today is our guest, Thomas Cognata. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into our C Invention. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, Richard?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Nice, beautiful day today. Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good. And welcome, Thomas Cognata. Where are you located, Thomas?
I'm in, the lovely, sunny, and rainy, depending on what time of day it is, Houston, Texas.
Awesome. Welcome. We're super excited to have you with us today. I've been we've done so much together that this has been one that's been in the making that I've been just really excited to have come forward. So before we dive into our C Invention and some of the ways that you play into that, I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the viewers, because I think this is your first time on our show here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Thomas.
All right. Hi, I'm Thomas. I've been involved in a lot of things over the course of my career. I am an engineer. I'm an engineer from an engineering family. Both my parents are engineers. My career spans industrial gas turbines, fuel cell startups, thermodynamics, thermal management, heat transfer, water management for the space station. But right now I'm back into fuel cells, and I'm supporting the Johnson Space Center fuel cell group at the Johnson Space Center. So in Houston, that's why I'm here, and working with NASA partners to develop fuel cell technologies to place in our vehicles and for power generation and energy storage on the moon and on Mars.
Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of the things that you're doing too, right? And a lot of things that we bring onto the show are really focused around sustainability. So I think, fuel cells, sort of the next generation of energy is going to be a big part of that. So thank you for everything you do in that arena. We are going to talk about our C letter invention this week. So our little drum roll here is this week we are going to be talking about condensate separator. So those are two words that people may or may not have heard before, or may not have heard together. So first I'm going to ask Richard. Richard, do you know what a condensate separator is?
No. but I can say this. I know what I want to get out of it,
All right. Yeah, what is that?
Basically, I'm here to represent Kyoki and Malia, who are youngsters. By the time they get to 25 years old, what can we do to make life better for them? So that's my function, and I'm here all ears.
Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Richard. Well, Thomas and I have invented a few technologies together in this space of condensate separation. And so perhaps we should hand it over to Thomas to give us a high-level overview so that we can all understand what is a condensate separator.
All right. Well, from the top level, let's start with, you learn in school that air is composed of oxygen, nitrogen, a few other things like carbon dioxide and whatnot. There's also water vapor in there. We usually think of this as humidity and icky, but it's an interesting thermodynamics problem, thinking about that air, that water vapor that's in there, and how to deal with it. There are a lot of everyday examples of condensate separation. If you live in a warmer climate where you have an air conditioner in your house or use an air conditioner in your car, you have condensate separation built right into to that setup. Condensate separation can be performed in a variety of ways. The simplest, when you're living on a planet, like we're doing right here and right now, is to use gravity for condensate separation. And that's what you're probably accustomed to seeing in your vehicle when you turn on the air conditioner. I don't know if anybody's ever looked under the car, but you'll see a drip, drip, drip. And that drip, drip, drip is condensate that's been separated from air that's blowing through your air conditioning system, dripping out through gravity condensation, or rather gravity separation. Other approaches for separating water from air when you've got water condensate involve using centrifugal force to separate it. In other words, spinning that air-water mixture so that your denser water moves to the outside and the air stays on the inside. So that would be an active means of performing condensate separation. And a passive means, in addition to gravity separation, would be using membranes or porous media that is wettable, and water would wet that media, fill it, and prevent gas from passing through while the water itself does pass through. So, number of ways of doing it. You see it done every day, even if you're not familiar with the term condensate separation.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so at a high level then, condensate separation is the separation of maybe liquids and gases from one another. So they're mixed together and we're looking at ways to separate those. Maybe we have functionality for each of them, or maybe we don't want one of them, or maybe we want one of them individually. So we utilize these different approaches and different technologies specifically to do this separation of gas and liquid. So awesome. Very cool. Thomas and go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, I used air and water as an example because that's something that is common. That's something that you can relate to. But your refrigeration systems, where you've got just one gas, and that gas being in vapor form or liquid form, and they're in the condenser, you have condensation happening, and there are various means of working with that and performing separation. And you can find a whole wide range of examples of approaching that. In fact, the technology we'll be talking about today actually has its origin in a refrigeration system. So,
yeah. I have a question. Is the condensate always water or moisture?
No, it's really the idea here is the thermodynamic concept of phase. So you have solids, liquids, and gases, and when we're talking about condensate separation, that would be if you have a gas, say a superheated gas, which basically just means it's well. I was just going to go down a rabbit hole of multi-phase physics, and if you have a gas mixture, so you may have a pure gas, or you may have a gas and a multi-component gas. When you cool it down to where you have saturation, which essentially means you start producing liquid, either of that gas or of a component of that gas mixture. That production of liquid is called condensation.
Condensate. Oh, okay, I got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Thomas. So with that broadly, I wanted to utilize the condensate separation patent and technology that we had developed together as an example that we could walk through quickly to kind of get, our feet wet, dip our toes into this condensate. Yeah. And maybe you could walk us through just at a high level what this is and how this particular technology works for separating our condensate.
Absolutely. So what you see there, that's patent. The picture that you see there is just a, let's say, conceptual drawing showing what's going on. And the idea here is to use the active approach to condensate separation that I described a little bit earlier, where you have a mixed phase fluid coming into this active separator. And what I mean by mixed phase, I mean that there is gas. Gas is a component of the fluid that's entering. Liquid is a component of the fluid that is entering. When it enters this device, the device is spinning, and the mixed phase fluid that's entering begins to rotate because of the action of the device that it's entering. And as it rotates, it performs essentially a centrifuge action. That centrifuge action forcing the liquid to an outer surface and allowing the gas to continue through with that liquid removed from the mixed phase. So it's entering mixed phase and it's exiting with two separate flow, or two separate streams, one that is gas only and one that is liquid only. I don't know if this shows the
pitot pump.
Yes, there we go. The pitot pump in it, but there's a variety of means of picking up that liquid component of this in an active approach like this. Pitot pump is a natural way for picking up the liquid and removing it as that separate stream. And I don't know if anybody would heard of what or knows what a pitot tube is by any chance.
I do.
Good.
Don't spoil it for everybody. So, tell us, Thomas, what is a pitot tube?
All right, a pitot tube is it's an instrument that's used to measure flow, and it's essentially a hollow tube that has 2 points where it measures that are open to flow. One point, which is at the very nose of the tube, and it's intended to be directed so that the nose of the tube, and this is air that's flowing. My fingers are terrible. I apologize. So we've got air flowing this direction. This is the air. We have a pitot tube right here. Pitot tube is here. Air is going over it. That pitot tube is oriented so that it's the air is directly impinging the nose. The nose is picking up what's called the stagnation pressure of that flowing air, flowing fluid, flowing gas. And a second tap, which would typically be on the side, perpendicular to the flow of the fluid going over it, picks up your goodness, the term eludes me, but the pressure of the environment. The difference between those two pressures tells you what the flow velocity is of the fluid that you're measuring. And that's just an explanation of what a pitot tube is. That has nothing to do with this particular device, but that pitot, the construction of this, a hollow tube with a nose that's direct, that's in that impinges the fluid that it's measuring. That is used in this particular device, and by orienting the nose of a hollow tube tangentially to the axis and in the fluid that's being held to the wall of the rotating device, and in that way you've got fluid that's rotating, and as it rotates, it's right into the nose cone of that pitot tube, and so you have a means of producing a high pressure liquid flow. That's how the liquid goes out.
Awesome. Okay, so to translate that, I'm going to give it a go.
All right, you do that. That was maybe words spaghetti. I apologize.
No, that's great. It's absolutely fantastic. And so I want to translate this into something that maybe people have seen a lot in the real world because I think it'll help with the understanding. So if you've ever been to a carnival or a fair where you go on the ride, where you walk in, it's kind of shaped like a spaceship, and you stand up against, you stand up against the wall, and then it turns on and it spins. And as it spins, you rise up, right? And then you're kind of floating on the wall, and it's super cool, right? You're pushed up against that wall. This is utilizing the same sort of physics as the technology, right, that we're talking about right here. Yeah. So as this thing is spinning, right, you'll see that instead of the human getting pushed up against the wall, the liquid gets pushed up against the wall, right? And then
Yep.
in the middle, all the air that was moving through has no liquid in it anymore, and that air can escape while that liquid is stuck against the wall and continues to spin. Now, it would stay stuck against the wall, so you need some sort of device that goes in there that allows us to remove that liquid. And that is where, right, this pitot tube or this pitot pump that Thomas was explaining really helps. You stick this in, it acts kind of like a straw, right? And in that, you're
Yep.
essentially utilizing that straw to pull the liquid out. So when you look at the inputs and outputs, it's really cool because at the input, you have a mixed phase fluid, or in this case, we can use an example of really humid air, for example. And then when you look at the output, you have two separate fluids. You have a dry stream of air and you have a stream of liquid, right? And now you can do what you will with either one. Maybe you're trying to collect the water, maybe you're trying to dry the air. There could be different reasons that you would want this separation to occur, right? The collection of water is very important in many places. And in some places, for example, on the International Space Station, right, which is where we designed this technology to be implemented and utilized, they want to utilize the water for drinking purposes, and they want to utilize the dry air to cool down the electronics and make its way back into the space station. So that was their reasoning for wanting to separate. But maybe each of us might have a different reason that we want to separate, right? I mean, there's so many applications. And so maybe that's what we want to dive into next, right? We talked a little bit about utilizing condensation and condensate separators for separating air and water, for example. We talked a little bit about refrigeration. What other major examples, or needs or problems exist in the world around us that a condensate separator may be useful for?
Well, I mean, in the simple form, there's applications for collecting water in dry locations. An example of a condensate separator would be a survival approach for collecting water in the desert, as an example.
Yeah. Very cool. And then there are, I think a lot of other applications as well. And you being in Houston might not know too much about some of the problems that are faced here, right, in the beautiful state of Hawaii. But it's really interesting because the example that you just gave is a particular one of interest here. So on our island, and on many islands, there's a dry side of the island and a wet side of the island. Our dry side of the island would look a lot like you would expect a typical desert to look, right? I mean, in some of the places. And there's not a lot of land-borne moisture, but there is a lot of atmospheric moisture. There is a lot of humidity in the air. So in some of these locations where that fluid is entrapped or entrained in the air and is moving past us, we could perhaps utilize condensate separation as a strategy or a technology for grabbing the water out of the air so that it can be utilized locally, right? And so when Thomas says we could utilize, this for producing water, right, atmospherically in places like deserts, this is a humongous potential application for condensate separator. Another big thing here on the Big Island particularly is there's a lot of agriculture that's done here. We have a lot of horticulturists, a lot of floriculturists, and a lot of indoor agriculture that's done. The indoor agriculture is something that Richard Haw here, I think, knows a thing or two about. So Richard, my first question is going to be to you, with your experience in indoor agriculture, is do you think that there would be a place for, condensate separators? Are there places where you want different levels of maybe humidity or liquid and air to be controlled?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is fungus. They like a certain amount of humidity. And if you can lower the humidity, you can control them and you don't have to use pesticides, stuff like that. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and that's a really big one. So let's talk about that really quickly. Thomas, are there ways that we could utilize condensate separators or this type of technology for management of indoor greenhouse applications?
Absolutely. So a device along those lines, or a gravity separation device, regardless of what approach is taken, you can set up a temperature controlling heat exchanger, a condensing heat exchanger, or something to that effect that can control the dew point of the air, either in the horticulture applications, or this old house that I'm sitting in right now. During the summer, I cool it, and it's so humid outside that the floorboards, it's a nice, lovely wood floor. The floorboards actually start warping because they absorb so much humidity from outside. So controlling that is something that I actually have to consider to some degree too. And I do that with a dehumidifier,
which is a version of a condensate separator.
Exactly, with gravity separation.
Very awesome. Very cool. Yeah, no, that's a huge opportunity here. Right? Especially when we look at islands, we see so many different biomes across the island, right? I mean, you can drive for a very short period of time and you could be in the desert, and in less than an hour have, traversed across a mountain range and are now in a jungle. So it's really interesting here because having solutions and technologies that allow us to control our humidity levels indoors, the amount of moisture and water that we have access to is a massively important thing. Especially in locations where these major deviations are occurring, right? We have these very different types of ecosystems, and we, I think, as humans, right, and especially, I know, Thomas, you know a lot about this and trying to do life support systems, right, for outer space when we're designing spacecraft or spacesuits or habitats for other planets, it becomes really interesting, right, because we as humans are very particular to the environments in which we're comfortable in, right? I mean, our temperature ranges are very important to us. Our range of pressures are very important to us. Our humidity levels are very important to us. So when we're designing these closed loop systems, we take very, very close care at how these things are being managed and looked after. That's something that should be and is important in many cases here on our own planet as well. So as we look into condensate separation, I know that one of the questions that I always have, and I know that Richard is always interested in, is are these technologies sustainable when you look at their manufacturing and their disposal as well, right? Would you consider them a green technology, right? Are they emissive technology? What does it look like when we look at condensate separators from more of a sustainability lens?
To be honest, this is not a question that I've delved deeply into in, I say, technology development paths that I've taken in the past. I can speak to, there are ways that these technologies can be used that would be sustainable. I mean, materials resourcing, and most particularly, I would say, in using the most applicable approach to the scenario that you're in. For example, I mean, you look at the various different types of separation approaches that we touched on in the beginning. You've got gravity, you've got active, and you've got membrane or membrane separation. Two of these are passive approaches. Gravity, you're basically using the earth to do all of your work for you. Gravity's wonderful. That's probably one of the very clear examples of a sustainable approach. And in fact, it's gravity separation that is used in say water separation for survivability in extreme environments where you have somebody dig a hole and then put a piece of plastic on it and a cup under the plastic and you get water overnight. That's a sustainable way to produce water. Active, this is an approach where you really need that to fit a niche set of circumstances. If you are looking at applications where you have a lot of movement and you need to separate water, but you don't have a lot of volume for doing a gravity separation, then you would look at active approaches. That is another reason why you look at that is if you don't have gravity as an option, which is why that's an approach that was looked at for the space station. If you can use membrane approaches, that's an approach that probably requires you to have some level of cleanliness. Then that could also potentially be a sustainable approach. Again, dependent on the material sourcing or the materials that you're using for that membrane itself, how it's constructed, and where the materials come from. And there are materials you can use for that sort of an application that are readily available and could be considered sustainable. But yeah, that's those are my thoughts there. And again, I haven't done a deep dive in the development work that I've done, but
yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And as we look at the life cycle assessment of those technologies, you look at what your different options are, right? When we're looking at cleaning water or getting access to viable drinking waters, right? It's what are the technologies made out of, right? In terms of material, how are they manufactured, right? Where are they coming from? Where are those sources from? And then let's compare them against other options, right? We have, right, desalination options, right? We have dehumidification and condensate separation options. We have water treatment options. There's a lot of different things that really need to be compared. But I think the important thing is that these things can be developed sustainably so long as you put sustainability as a factor, right? A weighted factor in the selection of the technologies, right? And I think the big thing that Thomas pointed out is the right and the most sustainable solution is really environment driven, right? So you pick the right solution for the right applications in the right environment. So I think that's really exciting. So let's go to any closing remarks or go back that you guys may have. First, Thomas, was there anything else that you thought was important here to share before we wrap up?
This was a lot of fun to walk through, and I'm glad to meet you guys. See you again, Brittany, and yeah, I mean, water separation doesn't sound that sexy, but it is a thermodynamics problem. It kind of is.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of my favorites. Thank you so much, Thomas. Really appreciate you being with us. And how we doing, Richard? Any closing remarks or go back for you?
Yeah, well, this all makes a lot of sense. So depending on what your objective is, if your objective is to become as climate friendly as possible, then you choose the procedure that'll take you in that direction. Then you figure out if the pluses exceed the minuses or what is the cost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, common sense. I get it.
Awesome. Thank you. And now later, if I ask you what a condensate separator is, do you think you'll be able to answer yes?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Awesome. That's wonderful. That sounds fantastic. Well, great. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys being here. With that, I wanted to wrap up. This is Inventing Our Future on ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you again, Thomas, for joining us. And thanks to you, all of our viewers, for watching. If you want to get our email advisories to see a complete listing of our shows, you can sign up for them on thinktechhawaii.com, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. So please tune in and we'll do a deep dive into our D invention. Until then, I'm Brittany Zimmerman.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.